Hi, everybody. How we doing tonight? My name is Vaughn Tempesta. I'm the Visitor Experience Manager here at the Science History Institute. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. If you didn't get a chance to visit the gallery tonight, fear not. We are open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and every first Friday until 7 p.m. By a show of hands, how many people are in the building tonight for the first time? Welcome. We're so happy to have you. And welcome back to all of our dedicated audience who keep coming back for more. Please allow me to introduce ourselves. At the Science History Institute, we tell the stories behind the science of our everyday lives. Through our exhibitions and programming, we aim to foster curiosity and to promote a deeper understanding between the intersection of science and history. Last fall, we unveiled our current exhibition, Lunchtime, The History of Science on the School Food Tray, which delves into the surprising history behind one of the most familiar rites of passage, eating a school lunch. This exhibition is on view until January 2026, and it explores the history of feeding children in U.S. schools and highlighting Philadelphia's key role in sparking the national discussion of feeding school children in the early 1900s. We will also be unveiling a new permanent exhibition, Earthly Matters, opening October 8th. This exhibition explores the history and science behind a collection of more than 20 minerals. These elements, crystals, gemstones, and even a meteorite tell the stories behind human curiosity around the natural world around us. So be sure to join us for that exciting celebration. Beyond physical exhibitions, we tell the story of science in countless ways, including our award-winning podcast and magazine, Distillations, which just wrapped up its newest season all about the origins of genetic engineering. You can listen wherever you get your podcast or at sciencehistory.org. And if you enjoy yourself tonight, I want to invite you to mark your calendars for some fun upcoming events and programs. On October 3rd, our next First Friday, Start Talking Science will take place. Dozens of STEM researchers from local universities will present their innovative projects to the community. We aim to increase public awareness and interest in cutting-edge local research to make STEM more accessible. You'll also be able to tour our research library and explore the history of science education in the museum. We do fun after-hours First Fridays every night with a new theme and activity. Our science and society lectures, like this one tonight, are also a recurring series, which explores the history of science embedded in our everyday lives. We invite scientists, historians, policymakers, and educators for engaging, in-depth conversations that expand our perspectives. Our next one will take place on October 22nd, where author Dava Sobel will be talking about the history of Marie Curie and the path she forged for women in science. Also, you may have noticed a paper near or around your seat, which is a free ticket to an advanced screening presented by the Institute of the new documentary Cracking the Code, Phil Sharp and the Biotech Revolution. This will be taking place next week on September 22nd at 7 p.m. at Landmark Ritz 5, just down the street on Walnut. Cracking the Code is narrated by Mark Ruffalo, and it's an inspiring story of the power of science to change the world. Phil Sharp's journey from a Kentucky farm boy to Nobel laureate embodies the American dream and the triumph of the entrepreneurial spirit. His 1977 groundbreaking discovery of RNA splicing rewrote the rules of molecular biology and ignited life-saving scientific revolution. You can register online or scan the QR code for your free ticket. Tonight's lecture is also part of our Joseph Priestley Society, or JPS, lecture series. Named for the 18th century scientist who discovered oxygen, JPS promotes a deeper understanding of science, technology, and industry, with an emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship. And tonight's speaker does just that. I will now hand it over to our president and CEO, David Cole, to introduce our esteemed guest tonight, Phoebe Miles, who will tell the story of a drink that changed the world of sports.
Well, good evening, everybody. Pleased to see so many hands went up when you said you're here for the first time tonight. Special welcome to all of you. Yeah, again, for being here for the first time. We hope it's the first of many times you come and see us. For those of you I haven't met, I'm David Cole. I'm the president and CEO of the Science History Institute, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Joseph Priestley Society lecture, which, as Vaughn mentioned, is a joint production with our Science and Society series of talks that once again explore the history of science embedded in our daily lives. That is our mantra. Before I introduce this evening's speaker, I also want to acknowledge the efforts of the volunteers who curate the Joseph Priestley Society series each year. If the JPS executive committee members in our audience would perhaps raise a hand and identify themselves. Yes, I'll ask you to join me in thanking them for their contributions to tonight's program. They are the intellectual force behind these programs, and we are most appreciative. I also want to know that this is the first of a series of Priestley Society presentations that we are planning this year. We have 4 upcoming virtual JPS lectures, which will be held at 1 p.m., each time at 1 p.m. on 4 days in our fall and spring season. Again, these are virtual JPS, meaning these allow us really to reach a global audience, as does tonight's program. So on October 30th, get your Halloween shoes on. Beyond Frankenstein, Transplant Science and Life-Saving Organs. December 1st, New Therapies for a World Without HIV. January 13, Alternative Power, Moving Beyond Wind and Solar with Geothermal Energy. And April 22nd, concluding the year's program, Back to the Past, Greening the Urban Environment with Compostable Waste and Urban Orchards. I think it's safe to say that all these topics are pretty timely, so encourage you to virtually attend all of those. Just think you don't have to worry about whether it's going to rain, right? So. And then on Friday, February 6th, from 5 to 7 p.m., we'll be offering an in-person hybrid panel discussion, February themed, as you can see. Wine, Roses, and Chocolate, How Romance and Science Sweeten the Dark Days of February. Make it date night, right? That should be an exciting program. We love to think about how chemistry is really woven into so many of the products that we enjoy and really kind of take for granted every day. So that will be one of those programs. These and other programs, I want to remind you, are free, supported by our donors, whom I'd like to thank tonight. Many of you are in our audience, and if you are not yet a donor, we hope you will be persuaded by programs like this evening's to become one. Thank you all so much. And now to tonight's program. At the Science History Institute, as we've already said several times tonight, we like to say that science has shaped every aspect of our daily lives throughout history. But people rarely understand how, why, or where that important scientific work happens. As we shine a light on the history of Gatorade, with a thank you to our presenter, Phoebe Miles and her inventive father, we hope you walk away with a compelling story that reveals how a life-saving, performance-enhancing, scientifically engineered drink has positively impacted the lives of athletes, joggers, football players, and hot and thirsty kids for decades, including this kid. I'm delighted to say that Phoebe Miles is the chair of the board of the Cade Museum for Creativity and Invention in Gainesville, Florida, and is here tonight to share the story of Gatorade with us in person. Phoebe and her husband, Richard Miles, were co-founders of the Cade Museum and named it after Gatorade inventor and Phoebe's father, James Robert Cade. The Cade Museum exists to transform communities by inspiring and equipping future inventors, entrepreneurs, and visionaries. And not only did Phoebe build a museum, but she also built an education curriculum. It is called Invent Possible, which serves as a framework for lifelong STEAM learning through the lens of invention. And in fact, in 2025, so not so long ago, Forbes named Phoebe to its 50 over 50 impact list, which is indeed a high honor, so congratulations. Yes, that merits something. That's a big deal. As Phoebe shares her, what we like to call story behind the science with the Priestley Society's global audience of students, teachers, and science professionals, her talk, I think, will be an illuminating reminder of how the history of science is revealed in our everyday experiences. Please join me in welcoming Phoebe Cade Miles. Phoebe.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here tonight because this week marks exactly 60 years ago, almost to the day, that the Gatorade experiment was taking place at the University of Florida with the Gator football team. I'm always so surprised how many people don't put together Gatorade with the Florida Gators. How many Gators do we have here tonight? I identify. So many of you will not have heard of my father's name, Dr. Cade, but you will recognize his voice if you've heard any of the commercials for the recent NBA when he says at the end, "That's why we called it Gatorade." So this is who we're speaking about tonight. For most people, the Gatorade shower is a sign of victory on the sidelines of the football field. Sorry, it gets even better. But to me, it's so much more than that. The invention of Gatorade is a big win for sports science. In the late 50s, in the early 60s, interest in the science and physiology of sport and exercise was just starting to bubble up across the nation. But it was very rudimentary and had not yet caught the public's imagination. But Gatorade was the first time in American academic medicine that scientific data was used to improve sports performance and sports outcomes, and in a very public way with wide national enthusiasm. If you will allow me a football metaphor, it was our national kickoff to the new discipline of sports medicine, but it also created a whole new category of sports drinks. So it wasn't just a win for sports science, it was a big win for science. For every bottle sold, every drop drunk, a small portion is set aside to fund scientific and medical research at the University of Florida. And all of those small drops add up. Last year, through Gatorade royalties alone, the University of Florida allocated over $30 million for path-breaking medical research and providing seed funding to young researchers to explore new ideas in medicine. So the invention of Gatorade was truly one of the most groundbreaking inventions of the last century. If you're good scientists, and I hope there are a lot of good scientists out there, you will be very skeptical of my claims. But I hope by the end of this presentation to have convinced you that it is true. So my father was a medical professor who was recruited to the University of Florida in 1960 to open the brand new division of renal medicine. That's kidney medicine. It was the first public medical school in the state of Florida. It's hard to imagine, but if you grew up in Florida in the 50s and you wanted to study medicine, you had to leave the state. So University of Florida was the first public medical, University of Miami was a private one 2 years before, but if you wanted to study medicine, you had to leave. So my dad was recruited to take the very first class of graduating medical school students that had just graduated and train them in the art of the kidney. He was a research scientist, but he was also a prolific inventor. Some of his inventions, like Gatorade, are very famous, and some, like electrolyte replacement beer, not so much. But for you here, it's interesting because Hoppin' Gator was actually bottled at the Pittsburgh Brewery and for a time was very popular. So my dad was one of the most creative people you would have ever hear about. He played the violin, he grew and hybridized roses, he restored cars, he even wrote and recited poetry. In short, he was truly a Renaissance man. And as a kidney specialist, he brought the first dialysis machines to the state of Florida. And he performed some of the first kidney transplants in the state as well. It was a direct result of kidney research that Gatorade was invented. And the story begins with an unusual friendship with a security guard at the hospital, Shands Teaching Hospital. But it was not an ordinary security guard. It was Dewayne Douglas, who was a former linebacker from the Gators. And he also worked as an assistant coach for the team. Back in the day, if you can imagine, when an assistant coach had to have a full-time job at the hospital to support his coaching hobby. So my dad and his team of postdoc fellows often had coffee with Dewayne. And one day, Dewayne mentioned that the night before, over 15 of his players had been admitted into the infirmary with heat stroke. And he asked a question to my dad that changed the world. He said, "Dr. Cade, why do my football players never have to pee?" Now that is a very interesting question to a kidney doctor. So in the course of the conversation, it turned out that the players were losing up to 15 pounds of sweat per game. And my dad said they had nothing left to pee with because they had sweat it all out. So most people would not see a connection between healthy football players and sick kidney patients. But my dad saw a connection. Both suffered from impaired kidney function, and he knew exactly what he needed to do. In a flash of inspiration, he asked Dewayne Douglas, "Can you introduce me to the head football coach?" So Dewayne set up the meeting. He met Coach Ray Graves, and he said, "I have this great idea to help your players." And Ray Graves thought about it, and he said, "You can't touch my varsity, but the freshmen would be fine, provided they agreed to volunteer." So this is the spreadsheet of the original 10 freshmen, pre-HIPAA, it has their names. And this is really interesting. It shows all of the things they were measuring on the football field. Again, exactly 60 years ago. They collected sweat in rubber gloves that had been used in the cattle industry for birthing calves. So they put on rubber gloves. They collected blood samples. They took temperature throughout the practice. Though I do have to mention some of the football players drew the line at the rectal thermometer temperatures. So my dad always said it was quite simple to create the formula. He knew exactly what to do. They took it back to the lab. I say it's quite simple because you had spent a lifetime of learning science and had studied to become a doctor and then a renal physiologist. So yes, quite simple, but lots of years behind that. So they formulated just the right concoction to restore electrolytes to the body, to restore the sodium that they needed to rehydrate. I say it's just the right concoction, except it tasted so bad, the players refused to drink it. They had vile words to use to describe it. So he came home and he was very depressed that day. And he told my mother, "Mary, I know what I made would help the Gators, but they won't drink it because it tastes so bad." Now, my mom was a mother of 6 kids, a housewife, a fabulous cook. And she said, "Bob, just add lemon." So they hand squeezed lemon, and the drink was at least drinkable, although not delicious, and some players still called it vile and putrid. The next day was the annual toilet bowl at the University of Florida, and that is where the freshman team plays varsity B. For the first time ever in Gator history, the freshman team beat the varsity on the 4th quarter. This was September 30th, and the Louisiana State University LSU game was the next day. So Coach Graves asked the doctors to prepare an entire batch for the entire team against LSU. The problem is, so they went back to the hospital, they didn't have enough glucose. And this is where breaking and entering in the name of science is so important. So remember, the assistant coach was a security guard, and He had the skeleton key, and he helped my dad break into labs across the hospital, stealing the glucose, but leaving IOUs in every lab. So the Gators were clear underdogs, but the next day, Florida stunned LSU. In a huge upset, Steve Spurrier led the team to victory in the fourth quarter. They went on to win all of their games the next season, leading Sports Illustrated to call them the worst undefeated team in the nation. That year, Gatorade was bottled in milk cartons supplied by the dairy science facilities, and Gator fans started to ask, why are the Gators drinking milk on the sidelines? Newspaper articles started to be written about the astonishing Peppy potion, and Florida went on to win the Orange Bowl that year, the first ever in Gator history, and Steve Spurrier won the 1966 Heisman Trophy, also a first for the Gator Nation. Any guesses as to who the second test subjects were? Infants were the second test subjects. The very next week, my father took huge jugs of hand-squeezed Gatorade to the pediatric ward where dozens of babies were hospitalized with severe dehydration through diarrheal disease. And it was transformational. Overnight, the death statistic for infants in Gainesville reduced to almost zero. To the doctor, this is the fact that they were the most proud of. And this preceded Pedialyte by 1 year, by the way. So this is the first example of an electrolyte replacement beverage for infants. So I hope you can see what a great scientist my father was. But he was a terrible businessman. If he had been charged of the commercialization of this product, this would have been his plan, with the emphasis on free. But thank God for the story. My dad had a brilliant team around him. This is the original team of grad students that he came down to teach about the kidney. It's Dr. Dana Shires, Dr. Alejandro de Casada, and Dr. Jim Free. Their first plan was to go to the VP of Research at the University of Florida and ask for assistance in producing and selling the product. By this time, they were overwhelmed with requests for the miracle drink and suggested a partnership with the UF. The University of Florida was not interested, saying, quote, "We are not in the soft drink business." Remember, there was no category for sports beverages at this time. So at that point, 2 new doctors joined the team, Dr. Gene Tubbs and Dr. Kent Bradley. And they brought a wellspring of new energy, expertise, and enthusiasm. Tubbs, who's shown right here, was actually a NASA cardiologist working with them, and he's here at NASA headquarters. He insisted that the team patent and trademark the new beverage. And not only that, he put up the money and the expertise to do so. So without him, Gatorade certainly wouldn't have been what it is, the success that it is today. Dr. Kent Bradley was the born salesman of the team. In fact, it was rumored among the team that he could sell snow to Eskimos. He was incredibly charming and very convincing. So in late 1966, Dr. Kent Bradley was recruited to Indiana to open up a new division of dialysis at the VA hospital in Indianapolis. All of the doctors eventually joined him there, but he was the first to go. And remember, dialysis was a brand new category. And so being trained on the first dialysis machines in Florida, they were a really hot commodity and were recruited as a team to go up to Indianapolis. But the first person Dr. Kent Bradley met was Claude Spillman, who had an advanced kidney disease and was close to death. Literally, he had a few days left to live. Dr. Bradley had a huge problem, though, because there wasn't a dialysis machine yet at the hospital. So he had to use all of his ingenuity to pull together a machine from scratch, checking in almost every day with the rest of the team in Gainesville of how to scrap together a dialysis machine to save this man. So they finally figured it out. They hooked Claude Spillman up to it, and they saved his life. This becomes a very important fact later, so stay tuned. But meanwhile, somehow Dr. Bradley got an invitation to the Christmas party of the CEO of Stokely Van Camp. We have somebody here that used to work for Stokely Van Camp. Raise your hand, yes. And he was there close to this time. So Stokely Van Camp they were famous for canned vegetables, particularly pork and beans. It's a perfect match for a sports drink, right? Yeah. So that did not deter Dr. Bradley. He marched to the CEO at the Christmas party, introduced himself, and said, "You have got to try this drink. It's incredible that my friends invented it at University of Florida." Well, the CEO gave a polite no, which Kent Bradley took as an enthusiastic yes. So the next day, he marches in with a mason jar of Gatorade, breezes past the secretary who says, "No, you don't have an appointment." He said, "Oh, no, absolutely. He is expecting me here." So somehow he convinced Alfred Stokely to take a chance on this brand new product. At this point, Claude Spillman, remember the one who was dying of kidney failure, was a lawyer. And he was on weekly dialysis. And he was so thankful for the doctor saving his life, he began to give pro bono advice on a legal contract with Stokely. So Stokely turned down the first offer, which was to buy it out for $1 million. They thought it was way too risky. Would there be a market for it? Was it too far outside of their wheelhouse? Could they successfully market such a product? So at that point, it was decided that all the doctors would share equally in whatever profits they made. And thank God they did that, because the lemonade stand model was just not working. So my dad left all of the business decisions to them. He was the only one to remain in Gainesville for the rest of his career, and the rest of the doctors did this brilliant contract. So Stokely came back with a counteroffer. They said, "How about royalties on each bottle sold? Pennies at a time, no risk up front." However, they forgot to cap it, not imagining they would ever sell over $1 million of a beverage. So it truly was the best business contract I have ever heard of, and it's still in effect today. And this is perhaps behind Dr. Gene Tubbs, remember the money guy, the patent guy, the trademark guy, celebrating Tubbs and his Wonder Water. So that's the story behind the history of the drink. But now, since this is a History of Science Institute, I would like to turn your attention to the science behind the world's first commercial electrolyte replacement beverage. But before that, I want to direct your attention to the original can. This was a pork and beans can, and the label is actually a pork and beans label. So it began rusting immediately on grocery shelves, and it led to the development of the first glass bottle in the late 60s, early 70s. So I'm going to start the science of Gatorade with one of the original commercials.
This is a laboratory. That's right, a laboratory, where scientists working with the Florida Gators develop the greatest thirst invention since water. Gatorade, the big thirst quencher for active people.
What's so great about Gatorade? Well, did you ever hear of giving a hot, sweaty football player all the cold drink he wants? Never. Never, that is, until Gatorade. Because Gatorade gets into your system approximately 12 times faster than water. 12 times faster. And if Gatorade works on the thirst they work up, think what it can do for you and the kids. Try it on a big thirst. Any kind of big thirst your active family can work up. Go ahead, even if you are hot and sweaty, drink all you want. I have personally found that Gatorade tastes so good, it really makes you glad you got thirsty.
Gatorade, the big thirst quencher. You from Stokely.
So I want you to focus on the question that Ray Graves asked in the commercial. Did you ever hear of giving a hot, sweaty football player all the cold drink he wants? Never. Never, that is, until Gatorade. Well, that's because before Gatorade, All coaches in the nation practice water deprivation during games and training. It seems unbelievable to us now and completely off balance, but they weren't completely crazy. There was actually a reason behind it. So the body is up to 60 to 70% water, depending on your age, your sex, your fitness level. And water is said to be either extracellular or intracellular. So that's within inside the cell and outside the cell. And that would be the bloodstream, blood plasma, and other interstitial fluids. So right here, we have a diagram of blood cells, and they would be within a bloodstream. So the blood cells are intracellular and the extracellular. So human health depends on a proper electrolyte balance between the intracellular and the extracellular. This is called equilibrium, where the electrolytes are balanced between the two. In equilibrium, the electrolyte balance is equal between the cell and outside the cell. There's a saying among kidney doctors, where sodium goes, water flows. And this is basically describing the concept of osmosis. Even if you're not a scientist, you'll remember learning about osmosis in high school. It means that a higher concentration of sodium in one part of the body will always attract water to it, and water will rush to the higher concentration to reach equilibrium. So in equilibrium, it's equal osmotic pressure between the two. That means the sodium and electrolyte level inside and out is balanced. In hypernatremia on the left, you have cellular dehydration. And this is where the extracellular fluid has higher sodium in the bloodstream than the neighboring cells. So water will rush out of the cell into the bloodstream to try to reach equilibrium. This is what you think of in classic dehydration. But in hyponatremia, that's cellular overhydration. It's the exact opposite. Here you have a lower concentration of sodium in the bloodstream, perhaps because of intense sweating or intestinal disease. And this creates a pressure imbalance with a higher concentration of electrolytes in the cell, meaning that if you drink water with no electrolytes, the only place it can go is inside the cell, where it causes the cell to swell and even to burst. So in hot environments, it is actually much more dangerous to have hyponatremia than hypernatremia, which is why football coaches would not allow it. And the damage done to the body is sometimes irreversible, even after rehydration. So electrolytes are essential, but replacing them in the right balance is much trickier than you would think. This is why death by dehydration used to be the third leading cause of death in worldwide world history. Even now, with electrolyte replacement packs being a standard part of every world health crisis, it is still the 12th leading cause of death. They don't call it dehydration, they call it diarrheal disease. But I think it's actually much more accurate to call it death by electrolyte imbalances. Scientists dealing with severe dehydration from whatever electrolyte imbalance is causing it, they will tell you that it's not the disease per se that kills. Say you have a virus or a bacteria, if you can intervene before major damage to organs occurs, you can keep the patient alive long enough that eventually their own immune system will kick in. Lest you think that this is just confined to the third world, the CDC estimates that over 1,200 people a year in the United States die from heat stroke and other heat-related illnesses. The reality of this was brought home to me just recently when I heard the story of Cody Treach. His story hit me particularly hard because it has a personal connection. Cody's great-grandfather was one of the early investors in the Gatorade Trust. Unless you live in Tucson, you most likely never heard of Cody, but he was a celebrated baseball player, and he was a great pitcher who once pitched a perfect game in high school, winning him a full scholarship at Southwestern College in Kansas. But his real dream was not to be a baseball player, but a firefighter just like his dad. So he was accepted into a fire academy and started training just last August. On the second day of training, by noon, temperatures had raised already to almost 100 degrees. It's then that the cadets donned full firefighting gear for a training walk. Cody began showing signs of heat stroke, and he collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, where they found his core temperature had risen to a dangerous 108 degrees. His kidneys had completely shut down. They made every effort to revive him, but there was no undoing the damage to his organs. Cody died 10 days later, leaving a wife who was 5 months pregnant with their first child, and he was just 26 years old. This is a tragic story because it was entirely preventable. Gatorade would have made all the difference in this situation. It's essential to get electrolytes back in the body. And electrolytes are minerals that carry an electrical charge when they're dissolved in water or body fluids, when they're called ions. There are 7 essential electrolytes: sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, phosphate, and bicarbonate. But all of the electrolytes, salt is king. Think about it. Of over 5,000 minerals known on the earth, there is only one that the human tongue can detect: salt. This is because it is so important to our survival. Salt was the economic engine of the ancient world. It was the white gold of antiquity. In fact, Rome never built any new city without first securing the means of salt production. Salt trade was heavily regulated and controlled by the government, and Roman soldiers were even paid in salt, where our word salary comes from, sal being Latin for salt. As we've already covered, salt is one of 7 essential electrolytes. They are the body's electrical system. Electrolyte, they're this electrical system of our body, allowing the brain to send communications to the rest of the body. They conduct electrical impulses that power muscle contractions, nerve signals, and even organ function. If you are low in electrolytes, you may get headaches, become confused, uncoordinated, and eventually even have seizures. So salt also regulates water in the body. Along with kidney, it helps keep blood volume at just the right levels for proper hydration. Remember the saying among the kidney doctors: where sodium goes, water flows. When you lose too much salt through sweat or intestinal disease, you lose all the water with it, and it can be life-threatening. So again, it's essential to get the sodium levels up. When sodium ions enter the intestine, they dock 2 by 2 on an epithelial cell, and they wait until a glucose molecule docks next to them in a type of cellular port. And then the glucose molecule opens the cellular port, ushering the salt into the body. And anybody want to guess how many water molecules follow 2 sodium ions? 4, 300 water molecules rush in with the salt, bringing life-giving water to the body. Gatorade is so effective because it is an isotonic beverage that provides just the right balance, osmotically speaking. And an isotonic beverage refers to a fluid that has roughly the same amount of dissolved solids as the bloodstream. So IVs are considered isotonic beverages. So Gatorade was the first oral rehydration isotonic beverage. But they didn't leave the exact formulation to chance. They went back to the lab and tested it. Here's my dad showing with his lab tech and their famous flow photometer. They did not leave it to chance, but scientifically engineered it to make it exactly the right osmotic pressure. So the ultimate success of Gatorade was made through new medical breakthroughs and national networks. How many of you have heard about inventors that are way ahead of their time? Maybe their idea may be exceptional, but their invention ultimately does not succeed because the surrounding society and economic influence and infrastructure are not in a place to even adopt the new technology. Gatorade was the first time rigorous scientific data was used to improve sports performance in the US. 1965 may seem very late for this, but when you think about it, it shouldn't really be that surprising. There simply wasn't the basic scientific knowledge about cellular physiology before then. But the late 40s and 50s saw a rapid improvement in medical machinery and devices that allowed breakthroughs in scientific understanding to occur. So here I have to give a shout out to this fabulous institute here, the Science History Institute. They have an incredible collection of machinery and data and archives that save this history for all of us. So I'm just going to show very quickly a couple of things that were influential in the 40s and 50s that helped lay the groundwork for Gatorade. This is the auto analyzer by Technicon that allowed far higher volumes of lab testing than the previous manual methods. And we have the culture counter, which revolutionized medical diagnostics. And finally, the flame spectrophotometer, which the NIH calls the engine of nephrology. So remember, it's incredible machinery that allowed the scientific knowledge to advance to the point where my dad could take that and create a new beverage. It was a combination of many such machines that laid the foundation for 3 important medical breakthroughs. The first was 1957, Jens Christian Skoe discovered the sodium-potassium pump. This maintains the normal concentration of sodium and potassium in the cells and controls cell volume. It's one of the most important functions in the body, and it's the base of the entire electrical communication in the body, critically important to the function of neurons. It's an active transport, meaning it requires energy. It's not a passive transport like osmosis. And for neurons, it's responsible for up to 3/4 of the energy use in a neuron. So in 1997, he won the Nobel Prize along with Paul T. Boyer and John E. Walker for this discovery. The second major discovery was in 1960 by Robert Crane, and he discovered the sodium-glucose cotransport mechanism. This is the mechanism for glucose absorption that we just went over. 2 sodium, 1 glucose, 300 water molecules. It's a key foundation for the science of Gatorade, indeed for all electrolyte replacement beverages that came afterwards. The sodium-glucose cotransport mechanism explains the phrase from Coach Ray Graves in the commercial. It gets water back in your system 12 times faster, 12 times faster. That's the sodium glucose cotransport mechanism. So the last was on May 3rd, 1965 in Atlantic City, the 57th annual meeting of the American Society for Clinical Investigation. I call this the most pivotal for the story of Gatorade, and the alternate title is Why You Should Always Do the Right Thing and Go to the Last Lecture even when you are at the beach. So Sid Malaware had been a resident in gastroenterology at the University of Florida the year before and had become friends with my father. He was presenting a paper at the conference, but there was just one problem. It was the very last paper on the very last day in Atlantic City. It was very unlikely that many people would attend. So my dad insisted that his team go to give moral support. Sid, in his research, had found that when a solution containing both glucose and salt was given to a subject to drink, the water was transported from the intestinal lumen into the blood much more rapidly than if the solution contained only sodium or glucose alone. So when my dad heard the question from the football coach, Dewayne Douglas, just 3 months later, he had this fresh in his mind and he knew exactly what he needed to do. Again, timing is everything. It wasn't just the new medical breakthroughs that made Gatorade possible, but it was also the establishment of a new national network that created just the right conditions for Gatorade to succeed, and that is the National Athletic Trainers Association. That was not founded until 1950. They had their inaugural meeting in Kansas City, and over 200 athletic trainers attended. Its founding purpose was to advocate for the profession by grouping individual athletic trainers' efforts into a powerful collective. So the University of Florida athletic trainers were Brady Greathouse and Jim Cunningham. They were both members of the National Athletic Trainers Association. In fact, Jim Cunningham once even won an award for being the top athletic trainer in the nation. They worked closely with the doctors and were instrumental to the success of the Gatorade experiment. In general, athletic trainers know much more than anyone about the physical condition of their players. They see firsthand the effects of various treatments, and they recognized immediately the effect that Gatorade had on their athletes. So early marketing of Gatorade was on the sidelines, and word of mouth, athletic trainer to athletic trainer and coach to coach. Greathouse immediately worked his network to get the word out about Gatorade. This is a letter from 1967. I love the logo of that old Gator. It's just too precious. And they had just finalized the name. That took a while. What was the spelling? So I just love this letter. But he's sending this out to his whole network, telling them about this new drink, what it contains, why they need it. So meanwhile, Super Bowl IV was just around the corner, and the Minnesota Vikings were heavily favored to win against the Kansas City Chiefs. I know we have a problem with the Chiefs here, but they're part of the story. Sorry. So unbeknownst to the Vikings, there was a fateful call that took place. So let's take a look at another commercial.
Salvation came in the ring of the phone.
Ray Graves called me. He was a good friend.
Ray Graves of the Florida Gators said his players are drinking this stuff called Gatorade.
That Gatorade really did the job. It was like liquid gold.
Come on, Lenny. Against the heavily favored Vikings in Super Bowl IV, the Chiefs emerged victorious. And the rest is history.
There's no better way to rehydrate athletes.
And today, Gatorade is on every sideline, every down, every game.
From boys to men, from one generation to the next, the games never end. And the legend continues.
So talk about serendipity and timing. The first national Super Bowl took place in 1967, just 2 weeks after Steve Spurrier and the 1966 team were the first college team to drink Gatorade and win on the fourth quarter. So Gatorade literally grew up with the Super Bowl. It also didn't hurt that Elvis Presley gave a shout out to Gatorade on the stage. He said, "This aids your Gator." And that was another serendipitous occasion. So based on the incredible success of Gatorade, my father dedicated the rest of his life to helping athletes, and in so doing turned Gainesville, the sleepy college town in the middle of nowhere, into a powerhouse of sports science. He collaborated with coaches, athletes, and other scientists to create one of the first centers of sports science in the nation. And as sports grew, so did the science to support it. My dad continued his collaboration with Brady Greathouse, working on many new products, including a football helmet that minimized concussions. Here he is modeling a football helmet, which they patented together, and Dad delighted in challenging people to hit him over the head with a baseball bat, trying to give him a concussion. And one time, some football player, he said, "You're not hitting me hard enough, hit it harder." And so he said, "My grandmother could hit harder than that, do it harder." So he whacked him over the head with a 4x4 or a 2x2, a big stick, and it broke the bags inside the helmet that ran down his face. And the football player thought he had killed my dad, but he didn't get a concussion. So it wasn't really long until he branched from football into track, into other sports as well. So my earliest memories are not on the football field, but they're on the track, where my dad was constantly running experiments in exercise physiology. He became close friends with Jimmy Carnes, who had been recruited to the UF in 1965 to become the track coach. And Jimmy Carnes founded the Florida Track Club, which is the oldest continually running track club in the nation, and began to attract the top runners in the world. That would be Frank Shorter, Jack Batchelor, and Jeff Galloway, all chose to move to Gainesville and eventually made it onto the 1972 Olympic team. They had an incredible coach in Jimmy Carnes, but they also had access to the latest and best scientific advice, including the first protein recovery shakes that my dad invented called Gator Go, which boasted a complete protein with all amino acids for rebuilding muscles after workouts. I remember attending carbohydrate loading parties on days before races. And that was based on the groundbreaking research of Bergstrom, Holtman, and Oliberg. And they would eat big plates of spaghetti. At one of these dinners after the Olympics, I still treasure this napkin that I got Frank Shorter, who won the Olympics, 1972 gold medal in the marathon, the first American ever to win the Olympics, wrote to me to perhaps, in parentheses, to perhaps the greatest runner in the world, Frank Shorter, USA. Imagine being a 9-year-old girl and having an Olympic gold medalist write that you could become the best runner, perhaps. So that was the environment of Gainesville, surrounded with famous athletes. So success attracts success, and fame attracts fame. Gainesville soon became a mecca for elite athletes and coaches from across the nation. Gainesville sports scene continued to develop well beyond football and track, attracting top talent like Olympic swimming coach Randy Reese, who's shown on the left. Randy was known to be very innovative in his training, and he worked closely with my father, allowing him to test and further refine his high-protein recovery shake for athletes. That year, the Gator swim team swept the 1984 Summer Olympics, winning multiple gold medals, including 2 from Mary Wade, who had become great friends with my dad and was an occasional dinner guest at our home. I have to give a shout out to my aunt and uncle in Mercer Island. She's from Mercer Island High School, so they said, be sure to say that. So if they're watching, yes, Mary Wade was from Seattle and chose to come to Florida because of Randy Reese and all of the science of sport that gave her the support she needed. So since 1972, when Frank Shorter won the marathon at the Olympics in Munich, University of Florida athletes have won 125 Olympic medals. If the University of Florida were an independent nation, and in some ways they are the Gator Nation, it's independent, this would put us at one of the top nations for Olympic performance. Depending on the year and the way that people figure it out, it could be anywhere from the 7th to the 16th top nation. But I figured it was Gator nations in the top 20 countries worldwide when you look at the number of total medals won since 1972. But most importantly, Gator sports cannot be separated from Gator science. Together, they transformed Gainesville into a global leader. Whether you're talking about the Orthopedic and Sports Medicine Institute, the Center for Exercise Science, UF has teams of scientists who study the human body's response to exertion. From elite performance to injury, they all follow in the footsteps of the original Gatorade research project. So I hope I have convinced you that a Gatorade shower doesn't just mean victory on the sidelines. It means so much more. Gatorade was not just the first big win for sports science. It wasn't just the first sports drink in the world. It wasn't just the first commercially available electrolyte replacement beverages that revolutionized global health. It is a gift that keeps giving. From its inception, royalties from Gatorade have funded over $400 million in medical research at the University of Florida, allowing research on rare orphan diseases, breakthroughs in treatments from cancer to diabetes and even rare tropical diseases. Gatorade truly represents a victory for all of us. For those of you whose mind may have wandered or even nodded off a bit during this presentation, I have great news for you. Turns out Gatorade marketers recently produced a 1-minute commercial in which rapper Kendrick Lamar pretty much summarizes my entire presentation tonight. And if I had ever been told my dad would be in a commercial with a rapper, I would have said, that is crazy talk. But here we are. Please enjoy this last commercial celebrating the victory that Gatorade is. Ooh.
Eagles fly in Super Bowl 59.
How much are you willing to lose? Take the 65 Gators. Losing steam, losing players, losing sweat. The solution?
A drink that hydrates better than water.
So they can work more, sweat more. Because when you do that, you can surpass the hype. You can inspire generation after generation. You can compete against anything, even gravity. Bing, bop, boom, 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 bop, bam. Expectations, you wouldn't understand. Or even yourself. So how much sweat are you willing to lose? That's how you know how much you're willing to win. Pickable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phoebe, for your excellent presentation. You're such an amazing speaker, and what an engaging story. If you would like a mic. In the interest of time, I'm going to open it up to our Q&A session now. If you are online on our Zoom webinar, you can use the Q&A feature there, and we'll try and get to you. But to start us off, I'd love to know more about your father's inventions, like the helmet and the other things you mentioned. He was such an inventor. Can you talk a little bit more about where did Go go?
Wait, is this turn on?
If you hit the green, there you go.
Okay. So this is an example I use often because Gatorade truly was successful because of the team surrounding my dad. Although my dad is a brilliant physician, thinker, creative person, as I said, he was not a great businessman. So Gatorade had the right team around him. Go ended up, it was very successful, obviously, with the swim team, and it's the basis of a lot of the muscle milk recovery shakes you see today. It was the first. It did not succeed because it wasn't marketed in the right way. It did not have the right team around it. The football helmet got caught up. It was actually very successful. It was used by the NFL. It did actually prevent concussions because it distributed the impact through packs of fluid. Remember when my dad, it busted and went down his face. That ran into some type of patent dispute. So that was taken off the market as well. Many of the players then complained that it was so heavy, but it's less heavy than helmets today, except before they were just really just shells with nothing inside them. So that was one. He created something called the Clean Streamer Straight Streamer, which could take clean sweep urine samples from women. I don't want to go too much into detail of what that is, but it would, you did not have to use an alcohol swab. So I thought he mismarketed that too. It should have been You Go Girl for camping, would have been much better. But it was, he marketed it to nephrologists for getting clean samples of urine.
Yeah.
Then there was the electrolyte replacement beer. That was a different story.
I love it. And I love hearing about the science behind Gatorade, which led me to consider is the other sports drinks and now this newfound industry of sports drink medicine. Do they have science behind them? And how did Gatorade start that?
Well, so I think Gatorade was the original. It was the first commercially available drink, and it preceded Pedialyte by 1 year. I do know that when you have a breakthrough in basic science, like what happened with the sodium potassium pump, the sodium glucose cotransport mechanism, you have people across the world that will be trying to figure out how to apply it. So across the nation or the world, people would be working on that. Pedialyte is similar, but it was used for infants that, so it has less sugar because it's not for athletes that need to keep the sugar volume, the sugar levels high, the glucose levels high. So Gatorade had more sugar for athletes. Other ones, I will say, I don't want to, trash talk any other competitor, but I will say butterflies do. Butterflies that had been almost extinct in Florida, in the Keys, were discovered, a mating pair, and they thought it had been extinct. They brought it to University of Florida, to the butterfly lab, and those butterflies refused to drink Powerade. But they loved melon-flavored Gatorade. Oh my God. So they had they laid 30 times more eggs with the Gatorade because it's everything they need for butterfly. And Gatorade brought back the population of the Miami blue butterfly. And then in California, some butterfly researchers copied the experiment and brought back another butterfly that was on the brink of extinction. So I'm just saying butterflies like Gatorade more.
That's incredible. Great for gators, great for butterflies. We have a question right over here.
This way? Here we go. First of all, Phoebe, thank you very much. A great presentation. Really enjoyed it. I have two questions. First of all, the first one, I think we talked a little bit, is I hear you have the Gatorade trademark, which is great. But I didn't hear if there are any patent of it, because today there are so many sports drink.
Right.
So maybe you can explain a little bit.
That's a great question, and it's a subject of a different talk. But Gatorade actually didn't have a patent. It has the trademark, but it had to withdraw the patent application because they had used $46 in federally funded research.
Oh.
And this was back in the 60s before there was a clear path to commercialization if you were at a federally funded research facility. So remember, my dad went to the university and said, please take it, please help us produce this. And they said, we're not in the soft drink business. They didn't have an office of tech licensing. So I say that Gatorade was actually the most important thing to me, even more than electrolyte replacement beverage, was that it was pretty much the first tech transfer product in the nation before there was such a thing. So there was a federal lawsuit against my father and the doctors. And the University of Florida did join in on that. It was quite a scary time of our life. And the settlement, though, was actually wonderful. And it sounds crazy to say I'm grateful for a lawsuit, but I actually am. It turned out for the best. The settlement was that the doctors had to withdraw their patent application. They had to publish their results in a new journal of sports physiology to share the formula with everybody. But they got to keep the trademark because they already had a business negotiation with Stokely Van Camp. And that they didn't take away, but they negotiated that they got the largest portion of royalties of, well, there's quite a few people in this group, but they have the largest portion, but it had to go to medical research. So if you remember, the University of Florida Medical School was brand new in the state. It was tiny. It was really a very small medical establishment. Now it's one of the largest in the Southeast, partly because they had this early success. They had early funding that could then attract more physicians and more research. We're now a sports powerhouse and a medical powerhouse.
Thank you. That's a great story here. Second question I have here, I'm just wondering if you had done any study here. Since when I first thinking about this is what is WADA will say from as a sports doping? Because Gatorade is obviously, we all know right now, it's definitely help the performance, right? And the WADA is the World Doping Control kind of organization. So obviously 50 years, 60 years ago, probably don't have it, but have you studied any of that, how to classify what is the sports doping, what is not as a performance enhancing?
I have not studied that, but I would say that Gatorade is a natural product. I mean, it was scientifically formulated, but using all natural minerals and electrolytes and glucose that your body naturally has. So I haven't studied that though. I'm sorry.
No worries. Yeah, definitely helped everybody, including
Yeah.
myself as well. Thank you very
And
much.
butterflies.
Thank you so much. You have another question right here?
Thank you for your talk. It's very, very entertaining and awesome. My question is, you mentioned Gator beer. What were the beneficial? Were there any beneficial?
Oh,
things?
yes.
And
So some of-
why didn't it become a big hit?
Well, it did. It was actually very popular. That was also. My dad wasn't supposed to use the word electrolyte or gator in anything, but he was such not a businessman. He was just always like trying to help students that would get too drunk and sick. So you could have one beer and it would, you would feel the effects much sooner because it was transported into your body, but then you recovered faster so they could drink less and recover faster. Yeah, so the students loved it.
Good.
I think it would be an excellent product. He just had to withdraw it because by the Gatorade contract, he was not supposed to use the word electrolyte or gator. But Hoppin' Gator is such a great name. And yeah, it was a great name. There's a great commercial by Gatorade that I didn't show. It would be great, but they were marketing it as a hangover drink. That's not a sports marketing thing anymore.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions from the crowd?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, great presentation. Thank you. I've been anticipating your speech for quite some time. I work in the flavor industry, and I've actually worked on line extensions of Gatorade flavors. And I'm wondering if you can tell us how you landed on the iconic lemon lime flavor. That was the very first flavor. And then if it's not too long of a story, if you could tell us about how Gatorade became commercialized into the general public.
Well, so the first flavor was lemon, thanks to my mom, and that's still the classic. They had nothing to do with the flavor profiles. That would have been Stokely scientist. I don't know whether our Stokely expert can answer that question. Did they have flavor scientists?
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. And it was sort of really a walk back into in time for me, because I was there when at Stokely Van Camp as a really a new marketing employee. And that was the only flavor, certainly at that time. And you know, it was a new product. It was an entirely new direction for consumer sort of item. And I think everyone was sort of, what do we do with it? You know, how do we promote it? And I wanted to ask you, I'm so curious, because the first commercial that you showed with the Stokely label, was that the Florida Gators or was it the Tennessee team? Because the Stokely family had and continues to have a very important connection with Tennessee. University of Tennessee, and especially the football program. So who was in the commercial?
In the first commercial, that was the Gator team. That was the Florida Gators. That's original footage from the Florida Gator team.
Was it Stokely label or whatever? Was it the University of Florida?
Yes.
Oh, it was.
That commercial was filmed at University of Florida on the football field.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I answered your question.
About the flavor. So it was lemon lime, back to you. Then I think they added on orange. And then I think it was when Quaker Oats bought it that they really expanded that, and then Pepsi even more. But to the commercialization, that was Stokely Van Camp that they distributed through Stokely pork and beans cans.
Amazing. I think we have time for one more question, and we'll take it.
Do we want to take one from the online audience? Are there any? No, okay.
Phoebe, I have to congratulate you because like when I was a kid, there was a bad outbreak of fever down in Louisiana, and it wasn't for your father's Gatorade, I wouldn't be alive here today.
Mm.
It saved about 8 of us down in Louisiana, and out of the 8, there's only about 4 of us left now. And it wasn't for your Gatorade, drank so much of it when I was a kid, when I was a baby, and my mother had to force it in my mouth because I wouldn't eat it, I wouldn't drink it. And my mom said, you better drink it or you're gonna croak here, so.
Yeah.
There was no other choice in the matter, so, I mean, as a baby, you're 8 months old, you're gonna say, well, I better drink it, if I don't drink it, you know, what's gonna happen? Between my grandmother and my great-grandmother, and like we left Louisiana and went to Florida, and there was a lady named Miss, I can't remember her last name, but she's gone too. She was saying that, well, honey, she said, I don't know what's wrong with your baby. She said, your baby's got a fever and we can't break it. You know, they put me in ice, they did this and that. But when the lady said, well, there's something on the market called Gatorade, maybe we'll try that. Well, within 4 or 5 days, the fever broke. And I've been drinking Gatorade ever since.
Yay.
Thank you all so much, and thank you to Phoebe again for such a inspiring and innovative story of the science behind Gatorade. Another round of applause for our speaker. Thank you so much. And if you are interested, you can find this talk and past JPS lectures online at sciencehistory.org/JPS videos. And now please enjoy a reception. We don't have Gator beer, but we do have a specialty Gatorade cocktail and refreshments in the back, and we'll be here till 8 p.m. So thank you so much, and be sure to follow us on social media and check out our upcoming events and programs and come back. But enjoy, and thank you again to Phoebe.